Okay, yeah, it's right away. Let's get started. I fucking found the right tab. There we go. Hello, all. It is Friday night, and it is time for some fairy tales. I honestly don't plan on stopping until we finish this book. There's, I think, only 6 stories left. Let's see, we're gonna. Yep, only 6 stories. But it's also like 40 something plus pages. But I want to finish this book so I can get into something different for next month. And maybe through Halloween, but it's horror fairy tales. So yeah, I want to get into those. And since I, did Frankenstein, I figured, there's some creepy ass fairy tales, and I will read those for my Friday nights. I may make a few other changes that I have not yet decided on. But anyway, it is Friday night, and it is fairy tales. And we're here for Friday Night Fairy Tales. And admittedly, next week it might be freaky fairy tales, but, go over that crossword when we get to it. Anyway. Hope you're all having a wonderful day, at least a better day than mine. I spent most of it taking down a ceiling fan, and then finding out that they were going to go ahead and replace my refrigerator, so I had to go and check that to make sure I could find what that would fit, because my kitchen was designed by idiots. And yeah. So it's just been a hell of a day. Then on top of that, not being able to play a game I ordered like back in April for my Xbox because everything then said it would work. And as soon as I try to install it, fuck no, it doesn't want to. Won't even let me install it. So I'm a little upset about that, especially since I took the hours of time to make the template I was going to play it on. I'm trying to see if I can get it refunded and then just set it up. The computer version, because they know I have it pre-ordered. I just want to transfer the account. I would like to destroy them. Ubisoft is a pain in the ass, but Xbox is apparently more so. This Xbox's webpage literally said that if you had the Xbox Live, you should be able to play it. And it wouldn't even let me fucking install. Even if I was playing it on my laptop or another computer from my Xbox, it wouldn't even let me do it. But it's just annoying as hell. It's a game I've been waiting for since it was announced, and thought, okay, this might be the last time I can buy to get a Star Wars game because I have no fucking money. But no. Charge my credit card and I can't do a damn thing. It doesn't even offer a refund on the fucking website. So, I don't know what the hell to do. I'm trying to talk to both Xbox and Ubisoft about it. It's, I don't want to lose the pre-order package. And, I'm on Disney Plus, so I get those bonuses too. And it doesn't do me a damn bit of good if I can't play the fucking game. But anyway. I haven't been drinking tonight. I think I should have. But I'm not. I did at least figure out the noise filter on my microphone, so I don't have to worry about the fans as much. Even though it's only been, it's like in the 70s right now, so it's not even that bad. Yeah, it's just been a day and a half, and I feel like I haven't gotten anything done. And on top of that, my cat's sick. And I can't fucking afford the vet either. Well, what really worries me is it's got symptoms of my life. I really don't want to think about losing my big black boy. because he was the last cat to learn from the previous one. And he's only 11 years old. It's 2 years younger than the previous one. But still, I don't like the thought of losing my black cat. The pressure doesn't help anything at all on top of that. Because I haven't been able to get my meds refilled. Yay! But anyway, I've got 6 stories left in the old fairy book. And we're going to do what's another book that I found that's frightful fairy tales, which is pretty much all the darker ones, and I'm going to try to read that for the next couple of months. Because, you know, who wouldn't want horror fairy tales? And I'm probably going to do another set design. Set designs. But anyway, before I have a complete mental breakdown, let's go into something more entertaining. Like fairy tales. I do have Streamloots turned on. Not that I don't have anything that it does except make noises at me. But it's another way that I can do stuff and Twitch doesn't take the money for it. I don't know how often Guild's going to cycle through the ads, but I may end up getting a processor, a used processor for my computer build. Hopefully it'll work. Then I'll still need the rest of the computer. I've got the case, motherboard, a couple of sticks of RAM, SSD for it, software, apparently maybe a processor, but then I'll still need, you know, video card, power supply. Power supply would probably be nice. But he maybe will give me that too, since he's stripping computers from his work, and since they don't bother just upgrading, they just replace, all the old pieces are still around. And I might be able to get my hands on those. But I have not heard back anything from that. I may actually get enough money this month to actually get a paycheck from Twitch next month, which will be a shock. And it'll probably pay my internet bill. As I can't afford to cover anything else. But anyway, have you seen my 60-second stories that I did on YouTube? Put them on YouTube and I put them on TikTok. I just rewrote fairly well-known stories and cut them down to like 60 seconds or less in some cases. I think 2 of them were maybe 50 seconds. Let's see if I can find it. Okay. Yeah, I've got one that's 49, one that's 52, and one that's 61. But the story we are doing tonight, it's the first story for the night, is this one. The longer version. I'm turning off the viewer camera. See that. I somehow managed to 361 volts. That's cool. But anyway, our first story for this wonderful Friday night of fairy tales is Thumbelina. There was once a woman who wanted to have quite a tiny little child, but she did not know where to get one from. So one day she went to an old witch and said, "I should so much like to have a tiny little child. Can you tell me where I can get one?" "Oh, we have got just one ready," said the witch. "Here's a barleycorn for you. It's not the kind the farmer sows in his field or feeds the cocks or hens with, I can tell you. Put it in a flower pot, and then you will see something happen." "Oh, thank you," said the woman, and gave the witch a shilling, for that is what it cost. Then she went home and planted the barleycorn. Immediately there grew out of it a large and beautiful flower, which looked kind of like a tulip, but the petals were tightly closed as if it were still only a bud. "What a beautiful flower!" exclaimed the woman, and she kissed the red and yellow petals. But as she kissed them, the flower burst open. It was a real tulip, such as one can see any day, but in the middle of blossom, on the green velvety petals, sat a little girl, quite tiny, trim, and pretty. She was scarcely half a thumb in height, so they called her Thumbelina. Elegant polished walnut shell served Thumbelina as a cradle, and the blue petals of the violet were her mattress, and a rose leaf her coverlid. There she lay at night, but in the daytime she used to play about on the table where the woman had put a bowl, surrounded by a ring of flowers with her stalks in the middle of which floated a great tulip petal, and on this Thumbelina would sit, and sailed from one side of the bowl to the other, rowing herself with 2 white horsehairs for oars. It was such a pretty sight. She could sing, too, with a voice more soft and sweet than had ever been heard before. One night, when she was lying in her pretty little bed, an old toad crept in through a broken pane in the window. She was ugly, clumsy, and clammy. She hopped on the table where Thumbelina lay asleep under the red rose leaf. "That's what make a beautiful wife for my son," said the toad, taking up the walnut shell with Thumbelina inside, and hopping with it through the window into the garden. There flowed a great wide stream with slippery and marshy banks. Here the toad lived with her son. Ugh, how ugly and clammy he was, just like his mother. "Rah, rah, rah," was all he could say when he saw the pretty little girl in the walnut shell. "Don't talk so loud or you'll wake her," said the old toad. "She might escape us even now. She's as light as a feather. We will put her at once on a broad water lily leaf in the stream. That will be quite an island for her. She is so small and light. She can't run away from there whilst we are preparing for the guest chamber under the marsh where she will live." Outside in the brook grew many water lilies with broad green leaves which looked as if they were swimming about on the water. The leaf farthest away was the largest, and to this the old toad swam with Thumbelina in her walnut shell. The tiny Thumbelina woke up very early the next morning, and when she saw where she was, she began to cry bitterly, for on every side of the great green leaf was water, and she could not get to the land. The old toad was down under the marsh, decorating her room with rushes and yellow marigold leaves, to make it a very grand for her new daughter-in-law. Then she swam out with her ugly son to the leaf where Thumbelina lay. She wanted to fetch the pretty cradle and put it into her room before Thumbelina came there. The old toad bowed low in the water before her and said, "Here is my son. You shall marry him and live in great magnificence under the marsh." Was all the sun could say. Then they took the neat little cradle and swam away with it. But Thumbelina sat alone on the great green leaf and wept, for she did not want to live with the clammy toad, or marry her ugly son. The little fishes swimming about under the water had seen the toad quite plainly, and heard what she had said, so they put their heads up to see the little girl. When they saw her, they thought her so pretty that they were very sorry she should go down with the ugly toad to live. No, that must not happen. They assembled in the water around the green stalk which supported the leaf on which she was sitting, and nibbled the stem too. Away floated the leaf down the stream, bearing Thumbelina far beyond the reach of the toad. On she sailed past several towns, and the little birds sitting in the bushes saw her and sang, "Oh, what a pretty little girl!" And the leaf floated farther and farther away. And thus Thumbelina left her native land. A beautiful little white butterfly fluttered above her, and at last settled on the leaf. Thumbelina pleased him, and she too was delighted, for now the toads could not reach her, and it was so beautiful where she was traveling. The sun shone on the water and made it sparkle like the brightest silver. She took off her sash and tied one end around the butterfly, and the other end she fastened to the leaf, so now that it glided along with her, faster than ever. A great cockchafer came flying past. He caught sight of Thumbelina, and in a moment had her in his arms round his slender waist, and had flown off with her into a tree. The green leaf floated down the stream, the butterfly with it, for he was fastened to the leaf and could not get loose from it. Oh, dear. How horrified poor little Thumbelina was when the cockchafer flew off with her to the tree. But she was especially distressed on the little white butterfly's account. She had tied him fast, so that if he could not get away from the leaf, he must starve to death. But the cockchafer did not trouble himself about that. He sat down with her on a large green leaf and gave her honey out of the flowers to eat, and told her that she was very pretty, although she wasn't in the least like a cockchafer. Later on, all the other cockchafers who lived in the same tree came to pay calls. They examined Thumbelina closely and remarked, "Why, she only has 2 legs! How very miserable!" "She has no feelers!" cried another. "Oh, how ugly she is!" said all the lady chafers. And yet Thumbelina was really very pretty. The cockchafer who had stolen her knew this very well, but when he heard all the ladies saying how ugly she was, he began to think so too, and would not keep her. She might go wherever she liked. So he flew her down to the tree from her and set her on a daisy. There she sat and wept, because she was so ugly that the cockchafer would have nothing to do with her, and yet she was the most beautiful creature imaginable, so soft and delicate, like the loveliest rose leaf. The whole summer poor Thumbelina lived alone in the great wood. She plaited a bed for herself of blades of grass, and hung up a clover leaf, so that she would be protected from the rain. She gathered honey from the flowers for food, and drank the dew on the leaves every morning. Thus the summer and the autumn passed, but when winter came, was a long, cold winter. All the birds who had sung so sweetly about her flown away, and the trees shed their leaves, and the flowers died, and the great clover leaf under which she had lived curled up, and nothing remained of it but a withered stalk. She was terribly cold, for her clothes were ragged, and she herself was quite small and thin. Ah, poor little Thumbelina. She would surely be frozen to death. Then it began to snow, and every snowflake that fell on her was like a whole shovelful thrown on one of us, for, we were big, and she was only an inch high. She wrapped herself around in a dead leaf, but it was torn in the middle and gave her no warmth. She was trembling with cold. Just outside the wood where she was now living lay a great cornfield, but this corn had been long gone for some time. Only the dry, bare stubble of it was left standing in the frozen ground. This made a forest for her to wander about in. All at once she came across the door of a field mouse who had a little hole under a cornstalk. There the mouse lived, quite snug and warm, with a storeroom full of corn, a splendid kitchen, and a dining room. Poor little Thumbelina went up to the door and begged for a little piece of barley, for she had not had anything to eat for the last 2 days. "Poor little creature," said the field mouse, for she was a kind-hearted old thing at the bottom. "Come into my warm room and have some dinner with me." As Thumbelina pleased her, she said, "As far as I'm concerned, you can spend the winter with me, but you must keep my room clean and tidy and tell me stories, for I like that very much." And Thumbelina did all the kind old field mouse asked. Did it remarkably well, too. "Now I am expecting a visitor," said the field mouse. "My neighbor comes to call on me once a week. He is in better circumstances than I am, and has big, great rooms, and wears a fine black velvet coat. If you could only marry him, we would be well provided for. He is blind, though. You must tell him all the prettiest stories you know." But Thumbelina did not trouble her head about him, for he was only a mole. He came and paid them a visit in his black velvet coat. "He is so rich and so accomplished," the young field mouse said to her. "His house is 20 times larger than mine. He possesses great knowledge, but he cannot bear the sun or the beautiful flowers. He speaks slightingly of them, for he has never seen them." Thumbelina had to sing to him, so she sang, ladybird, fly away home," and other songs so pretty that the mole fell in love with her. But he did not say anything. He was a very cautious man. Well, for a mole. A short time before, he had dug a long passage through the ground from his own house to that of his neighbor, and in this he gave the field mouse and Thumbelina permission to walk as often as they had liked. But he begged them not to be afraid of the dead bird that lay in the passage. It was a real bird with a beak and feathers, and must have died a little time ago. Now lay buried just where he had made his tunnel. The mole took a piece of rotten wood from his mouth, for that glows like fire in the dark, and went in front, lighting them through the long passage. Then they came to the place where the dead bird lay. The mole put his broad nose against the ceiling and pushed a hole through it, so that the daylight could shine down. In the middle of the path lay a dead swallow, his pretty wings pressed close to his sides, his claws and head drawn under his feathers. The poor bird had evidently died of cold. Thumbelina was very sorry, for she was very fond of all little birds. They had sung and twittered so beautifully to her through the summer, but the mole kicked him with his bandy legs and said, Now he can't sing any more. He must be very miserable to be a little bird. I am thankful that none of my little children are. Birds always starve in winter.
Yes, you speak like a sensible man,
said the field mouse.
What has a bird in spite of all his singing in the winter time? He must starve and freeze, and that must be very pleasant for him, I must say.
Thumbelina did not say anything, but when the other two had passed on, she bent down to the bird and brushed aside his feathers from his head, and kissed his closed eyes gently.
Perhaps it was he that sang to me so pretty in the summer, she thought. How much pleasure he'd give me, dear little bird.
The mole closed up the hole again which let in the light, then escorted the ladies home, but Thumbelina could not sleep that night, so she got out of bed and plaited a great big blanket of straw, and carried it off, and spread it over the dead bird, and piled upon it some thistledown as soft as cotton wool, which she had found in the field mouse's room, so that the poor little thing should lie warmly buried.
Farewell, pretty little bird, she said. Farewell, and thank you for your beautiful songs in the summer, when the trees were green and the sun shone down warmly on us.
Then she laid her head against the bird's heart. But the bird was not dead. He had been frozen, but now that she had warmed him, he was coming to life again. In the autumn, swallows fly away to foreign lands, but there are some who are a bit late in starting. And then they get so cold that they drop down as if dead, and the snow comes and covers them up. Thumbelina trembled. She was so frightened, for the bird was very large in comparison to herself, only an inch high. But she took courage and piled them down more closely over the poor swallow, and fetched her own coverlid and laid it over his head. The next night she crept out again to him. Then he was alive, but very weak. He could only open his eyes for a moment to look at them, who was standing in front of him with a piece of rotten wood in her hand, for she had no other lantern.
Thank you, pretty little child,
said the swallow to her.
I am beautifully warm. Soon I shall regain my strength, and then I shall be able to fly out into the warm sunshine. Oh, she said, it is very cold outside. It is snowing and freezing. Stay in your warm bed. I will take care of you.
Then she brought him a petal of water, which he drank, after which he related to her how he had torn one of his wings on a bramble, so that he could not fly as fast as the other swallows, who had flown far away to warmer lands. So at last he dropped down exhausted, and then he could remember no more. The whole winter he remained down there, and Thumbelina looked after him and nursed him tenderly. Neither the mole nor the field mouse learned anything about this, for they could not bear the poor swallow. When the spring came and the sun warmed the earth again, the swallow said farewell to Thumbelina, who opened a hole in the roof for him, which the mole had made. The sun shone brightly down upon her, and the swallow asked her if she would go with him. She could sit upon his back. Thumbelina wanted very much to fly far away from to the green wood, but she knew that the old field mouse would be sad if she ran away.
No, I mustn't come, she said.
Farewell, little girl, said the swallow, and flew off into the sunshine. Thumbelina gazed after him with tears standing in her eyes, for she was very fond of the swallow.
Tweet, tweet,
sang the bird, and flew into the green wood. Thumbelina was very unhappy. She was not allowed to go out into the warm sunshine. The corn which had been sowed in the field over the field mouse's home grew up high into the air, and made a thick forest for the poor little girl, who was only an inch high.
Now you are to be a bride, Thumbelina,
said the field mouse,
for a neighbor has proposed to you. What a piece of fortune for a poor child like you! Now you must set to work at your linen for your dowry, for nothing must be lacking if you are to become the wife of our neighbor, the mole. Ah!
Thumbelina had to spin all day long, and every evening the mole visited her and told her that when the summer was over the sun would not shine so hot. Now it was burning the earth as hard as stone. Yes, when the summer had passed, they would keep the wedding. But she was not at all pleased about it, for she did not like the stupid mole. Every morning when the sun was rising, and every evening when it was setting, she would steal out of the house door, and when the breeze parted the ears of corn so that she could see the blue sky through them. She thought how bright and beautiful it must be outside, and longed to see her dear swallow again. But he never came. No doubt he had flown away to far and greater into the green woods. By autumn, Thumbelina had finished her dowry.
In 4 weeks you will be married, said the field mouse. Don't be obstinate, or I shall bite you with my sharp white teeth. You will get a fine husband. The king himself has not such a velvet coat. His storeroom and cellar are full, and you should be thankful for that.
Well, the wedding day arrived. The mole had come to fetch Thumbelina to live with him deep down under the ground, never to come out into the warm sun again, for that was what he didn't like. The poor girl was very sad, for now she must say goodbye to the beautiful sun.
Farewell, bright sun,
she cried, stretching out her arms towards it and taking another step outside the house, for now the corn had been reaped and only the dry stubble was left standing.
Farewell, farewell,
she said, and put her arms around the little red flower that grew there.
Give my love to the dear swallow when you see him.
Tweet, sounded in her ear all at once. She looked up, and there was a swallow flying past. As soon as he saw Thumbelina, he was very glad. She told him how unwilling she was to marry the ugly mole, and then she had to live underground where the sun never shone, and she could not help bursting into tears.
The cold winter's coming soon, said the swallow. I must fly away to warmer lands. Will you come with me? You can sit on my back, and we will fly far away from the ugly mole in this dark house, over the mountains to the warm countries where the sun shines more brightly than here, where it is always summer, and there are always beautiful flowers. Do come with me, dear little Thumbelina, who saved my life when I lay frozen in the dark tunnel. Yes, I will go with you,
said Thumbelina, and got on the swallow's back, with her feet on one of his outstretched wings. Up he flew into the air, over the woods and seas, over the great mountains where the snow is always lying. And if she was cold, she crept under his warm feathers, only keeping her little head out to admire all the beautiful things in the world beneath. At last they came to the warm lands. The sun was brighter, and the sky seemed twice as high, and in the hedges hung the finest green and purple grapes, and the woods grew oranges and lemons. The air was scented with myrtle and mint, and on the roads were pretty little children running around and playing with great, gorgeous butterflies. But the swallow flew on farther, and it became more and more beautiful. Under the most splendid green trees beside a blue lake stood a glittering white marble castle. Vines hung about the pillars, and there were many swallows' nests, and in one of these lived the swallow who was carrying Thumbelina.
Here is my house, he said, but it won't do for you to live with me. I am not tidy enough to please you. Find a home for yourself in one of the lovely flowers that grow down there. Now I will set you down, and you can do whatever you like. That will be splendid, she said, clapping her little hands.
There lay a great white marble column which had fallen to the ground and broken into 3 pieces. But between these grew the most beautiful white flowers. The swallow flew down with Thumbelina and set her down upon one of the broad leaves. There, to her astonishment, she found a tiny little man sitting in the middle of the flower, as white and transparent as if he were made of glass. He had the prettiest golden crown on his head, and the most beautiful wings on his shoulders. He himself was no bigger than Thumbelina. He was the spirit of the flower. In each blossom there dwelt a tiny man or woman, but this one was the king over all the others. "How handsome he is," she whispered to the swallow. The little prince was very much frightened at the swallow, for in comparison with one so tiny as himself, he seemed giant. But when he saw Thumbelina, he was delighted, for she was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. So he took his golden crown off his head and put it on hers, asking her her name, and if she would be his wife. And then she would be queen of all the flowers. Yes, he was a different kind of husband to the son of the toad, or the mole with the black velvet coat. So she said, "Yes," to the noble prince, and out of each flower came a lady and gentleman, each so tiny and pretty that it was a pleasure to see them. Each brought Thumbelina a present, but the best of all was a beautiful pair of wings which were fastened on her back. And now she too could fly from flower to flower. They all wished her joy, and the swallow sat above in his nest and sang a wedding march. That he did as well as he could, but he was sad because he was very fond of Thumbelina, not want to be separated from her. "You shall not be called Thumbelina," said the spirit of the flower to her. "That is an ugly name. You are much too pretty for that. We shall call you May Blossom." "Farewell, farewell," said the little swallow with a heavy heart, and flew away to farther lands, far, far away, right back to Denmark. There he had a little nest above a window where his wife lived, who can tell fairy stories. "Tweet, tweet," he said to her. This is the way we learned the whole story. Alrighty. Now see, there's another version of it where he doesn't fly back to his wife who tells fairy tales. He flies over his nest is over the window of an author who writes fairy tales, and he told the author the story. And if you don't know, that was a Hans Christian Andersen story, and he likes to put himself in the stories at the end. I mean, that's why the bird specifically flew back to Denmark. But one must wonder, what is the average wind speed velocity of an unladen swallow? European, clearly. And what's really sad is if you think about it, coconuts are migratory. So somehow I had managed to summarize that entire story into 49 seconds when I did the other. Clearly. I mean, she's maybe an inch tall. The swallow might be 4 or 5. I can't remember how big a swallow is. The European one is slightly smaller than the African. But she was able to hide under his feathers in flight, so she was not very big. I mean, only an inch. So if she's able to do that, since swallow has to be at least 5 or 6, maybe. I don't know. I've never seen a swallow. At least not African or European. But can you tell that it was flying down to Italy? Because every tree and herb that was described in where the fairyland was, including the white marble castles, would have been Italy or Greece. So it just crossed Europe. Flew over the Alps, apparently, because it said that it flew over the mountains where the snow never leaves. It's always interesting when you can track down the actual locations of stories. But anyway, enough of the swallowing. Nothing? Nothing at all. I get the feeling I need to turn my filters. Doing this thing. Oh, wrong one. I turn up this a little bit. It's deafening. Oh, then carry on. Anyway, our next story is another bird. The nightingale. In China, as I dare say you know, the emperor is Chinese, and all his courtiers are also Chinese. The story I am going to tell you happened many years ago, but is worthwhile for you to listen to it, before it is forgotten. The emperor's palace is the most splendid in the world, all made of priceless porcelain, but so brittle and delicate that you had to take great care how you touched it. And the garden were the most beautiful flowers, and on the loveliest of them were tied silver bells which tinkled, so that if you passed, you could not help looking at the flowers. Everything in the emperor's garden was admirably arranged with a view to effect, and the garden was so large that even the gardener himself did not quite know where it ended. If you ever got beyond it, you came to a stately forest with great trees and deep lakes in it. The forest sloped down to the sea, which is clear blue. Large ships could sail under the boughs of the trees, and in these trees lived a nightingale. She sang so beautifully that even the poor fisherman, who had not so much to do, stood and listened when he came at nights to cast his nets. "Oh, how beautiful she is," he said, but he had to attend to his work and forgot about the bird. But when the next night, the fisherman came there again, and he said the same thing. "Oh, how beautiful it is." From all the countries round came travellers to the emperor's town, who were astonished at the palace and the garden. But when they heard the nightingale, they said, "This is the finest thing of all." The travellers told all about it when they went home. Learned scholars wrote many books upon the palace and the garden, but they did not forget the nightingale. She was praised the most, and all the poets composed splendid verses on the nightingale in the forest by the deep sea. The books were circulated throughout the world, and some of them reached the emperor. He sat in his golden chair and read and read. He nodded his head every moment, for he liked reading the brilliant accounts of all the town, the palace, and the garden. But the nightingale was better than all, he saw written. "What is that?" said the emperor. "I don't know anything about a nightingale. Is there such a bird in my emperor, and so near in my garden? I have never heard it. Fancy reading for the first time about it in this book." and he called his first lord to him. He was so proud that if anyone lower rank than his own ventured to speak to him or just ask him anything, he would say nothing but "P." And that does not mean anything at all. "Here's the most remarkable bird, which is called a nightingale," said the emperor. "They say it is the most glorious thing in my kingdom. Why has no one ever said anything about it to me?" "I've never heard of it before mentioned," said the first lord. "I will look for it and find it." But where was it to be found? The first lord ran up and down stairs through the halls and corridors, but none of those he met had ever heard of the nightingale. And the first lord ran against the emperor and told him that it must be an invention on the part of those who had written the books. "Your Majesty, there can certainly believe all that is written. There are some inventions called the Black Art." "But the book in which I read says this," said the emperor, "is sent to me by the great Majesty the Emperor of Japan, so it cannot be true. I will hear this nightingale. She must be here this evening. She has my greatest permission to appear, and if she does not, the whole court shall be trampled under foot of supper." "Think," said the first lord, and he ran up and down the stairs, through the halls and corridors. Half the court ran with him, for they did not want to be trampled under foot. Everyone was asking after the wonderful nightingale, which all the world knew of, except those of the court. At last they met a poor little girl in the kitchen and said, "Oh, I know the nightingale well, how she sings. I have permission to carry the scraps all over the court meals to my poor sick mother. And when I am going home at night, tired and weary, I rest for a little while in the wood, and then I hear the nightingale singing. It brings me to tears, and I feel as if my mother were kissing me." "Little kitchen maid," said the first lord, "I will give you the place in the kitchen, and you shall have leave to see the emperor at dinner, if you can lead us to the nightingale, for she is invited to come to the court this evening." And so they all went into the wood where the nightingale was wont to sing, and half the court went too. When they were there, they heard a cow mooing. "Oh," said the portress, "now we have found her. What a beautiful power for such a small beast to have. I'm sure we have heard her before." "No, that is a cow mooing," said the little kitchen maid. "We're still a long way off." Then the frogs began to croak in the marsh. "Splendid," said the Chinese chaplain. "Now we hear her. It sounds like a little church bell." "Oh, no, those are frogs," said the little kitchen maid. "But I think we shall hear her soon." Then the nightingale began to sing. "There she is," cried the little girl. "Listen, she is sitting there." And she pointed to a little dark gray bird up in the branches. "Is it possible?" said the first lord. "I should never have thought it. How ordinary she looks. She must surely have lost her feathers because she sees many distinguished men around her." "Little nightingale," called out the little kitchen maid, "our gracious emperor wants you to sing before him." "With the greatest of pleasure," said the nightingale, and she sang so gloriously that it was a pleasure to listen to. "It sounds like glass bells," said the first lord, "and look how her little throat works. It is wondrous that we have never heard her before. She will be a great success in court." "Shall I sing once more for the emperor?" asked the nightingale, thinking that the emperor was there. "My esteemed little nightingale," said the first lord, "I have the great pleasure to invite you to court this evening, where his gracious imperial highness will be enchanted with your charming song." "It sounds best in the great wood," said the nightingale, but still she came gladly when she heard the emperor wished it. At the palace everything was splendidly prepared. The porcelain walls and floors glittered in the light of many thousand gold lamps. The most gorgeous flowers were tinkling out as well in the places in the corridors. There was such a hurrying and draft that all the bells jingled so much that one could not hear oneself speak. At the center of the great hall, where the emperor sat on the golden perch, and the Nightingale sat. The whole court was there, and the little kitchen maid was allowed to stand behind the door, now that she was the court cook. Everyone was dressed in his best, and everyone was looking toward the little gray bird to whom the emperor nodded. The Nightingale was sang so gloriously that the tears came to the emperor's eyes and ran down his cheeks. Then the Nightingale's song became even more beautiful and went straight to all the hearts. The emperor was so delighted that he said she should wear his gold slipper around her neck. But the Nightingale thanked him and said that she had had enough reward already.
I have seen the tears in the emperor's eyes, and that is a great reward. The emperor's tears have such power.
Then she sang again with her gloriously sweet voice.
That is the most charming coquetry I have ever seen,
said all the ladies around, and they all took to holding water in their mouths so that they might gurgle whenever someone spoke to them. Then they thought themselves nightingales. Yes, the lackeys and chambermaids announced that they were pleased, which means a great deal, for they are the most difficult people of all to satisfy. In short, the Nightingale was a great success. She had to stay at court now. She had her own cage and permission to walk out twice in the day and once at night. She was given 12 servants, each who held silken strings which were fastened around her leg. There was little pleasure in flying about like this. The whole town was talking about the wonderful bird, and when two people met each other, one would say Nightin and the other Gale.
Nightingale.
Nightingale. And then the other would both sigh and understand what. Yes, and 11 grocer's children were called after her, and not one of them could sing a note. One day the emperor received a large parcel on it, which was written, The Nightingale. There's another new book about our famous bird, said the emperor. But it was not a book, but a little mechanical toy which lay in a box. An artificial nightingale which was like the real one, only that it was set all over with diamonds, rubies, and sapphires. When it was wound up, it could sing a piece the real bird sang, and moved its tail up and down, glittered with silver and gold. Around its neck was a little collar on which was written, The Nightingale of the Emperor of Japan is nothing compared to that of the Emperor of China. This is magnificent, they all said. The man who had brought the clockwork bird received on the spot a little bringer of the first imperial nightingale. Now they must sing together. What a duet we shall have! And so they sang together, but their voices did not blend, for the real nightingale sang in her way, and the clockwork bird sang waltzes. It is not its fault, said the bandmaster. It keeps very good time and is quite after my style. Then the artificial bird had to sing alone. It gave as much pleasure as the real one, and then it was such pretty to look at. It sparkled like bracelets and necklaces. 33 times it sang the same piece without being tired. People would like to have heard it again, but the emperor thought that the living nightingale should sing now. But where was she? No one had noticed that she had flown out the open window away to her green woods. What shall we do? Said the emperor. All the court scolded and said that the nightingale was very ungrateful. But we still have the best bird, they said, and the artificial bird had to sing again. And that was the 34th time they had heard the same piece. But they did not yet know it by heart. It was much too difficult. The bandmaster praised the bird tremendously. Yes, he assured them it was better than the real nightingale, not only because of its beautiful plumage and diamonds, but inside as well. For you see, my lords and ladies, and your Imperial Majesty, with a real nightingale one can never tell what will come out, but all is known about the artificial bird. You can explain it, you can open it, you can show people where the waltzes lie, how they go, and how one follows the other. That's just what we think, said everyone, and the bandmaster received permission to show the bird to the people the next Sunday. They should hear it. And they heard it, and they were pleased as if they had been intoxicated with tea after the Chinese fashion, and they all said, "Oh!" and held up their forefingers and nodded time. But the poor fisherman, who had heard the real nightingale, said, "This one sings well enough, the tune glides out, but there's something wanting. I don't know what." The real nightingale was banished from the kingdom. The artificial bird was put on silken cushions by the emperor's bed. All the presents which it received, gold and precious stones, lay around it, and it was given the title of Imperial Night Singer. First from the left, for the emperor counted that side as more distinguished, being the side on which the heart is. The emperor's heart is also on the left. And the bandmaster wrote a work of 25 volumes about the terrific artificial bird, and it learned long, so full of the hardest Chinese words that everyone said they could read it and understood it. For once they had been stupid about a book, and had been trampled underfoot in consequence. So a whole year passed. The emperor of the court and the Chinese knew every note of the artificial bird song by heart. But they liked it all the better for this. They could sing along with it, and they did. The street boys sang, "Tra-la-la-la-la," and the emperor sang it sometimes too. It was indeed delightful. But one evening, when the artificial bird was singing its best, the emperor lay in his bed listening to it. Something in the bird. Something snapped. All the wheels ran down. The emperor sprang up and had his physician summoned. What could he do? Then the clockmaster came, and after a great deal of talking and examined, he put the bird somewhat in order, but he said that it must be very seldom used, as the works were nearly worn out, and it was impossible to put in new ones. And here was a calamity. Only once a year was the artificial bird allowed to sing, and even that was almost too much for it. But then the bandmaster made a little speech full of hard words, saying that it was just as good as before. And so, of course, it was just as good as before. So 5 years passed, and then a great sorrow came to the nation. The Chinese look upon their emperor and everything, and now he was ill, and not likely to live, it was said. Already a new emperor had been chosen, and the people stood outside in the streets and asked the First Lord how old the old emperor was. "Pih," was all he said, and shook his head. Cold and pale lay the emperor in a splendid great bed. The whole court believed him dead, and one after the other left to pay their respects to the new emperor. Everywhere in the hall, the corridors, cloth was laid down so that no footsteps could be heard, and everything was still, very, very still, and nothing came to break the silence. The emperor longed for something to come and relieve the monotony of the death-like stillness. If someone could speak to him, if only someone would sing to him, music could carry his thoughts away, and would break the spell alive. The moon was steaming in through the window, but that too was silent, quite silent. "Music, music," cried the emperor. "Little golden birds, sing, do sing. I gave you golden jewels. I've hung my gold slipper round your neck with my own hand. Do sing, sing." But the bird was silent. There was no one to wind it up, so it could not sing. And all was silent, so terribly silent. All at once there came in the window the most glorious burst of song. It was the living Nightingale, who, sitting outside on a bough, had heard the need of her emperor, and had come to sing to him of comfort and hope. And as she sang, the blood flowed quicker and quicker in the emperor's weak limbs, and life began to return. Thank you, said the emperor. You divine little bird. I know you. I chased you from my kingdom, and you have given me life again. How can I reward you?
You have already done that, said the Nightingale. I brought tears to your eyes the first time I sang. I shall never forget that. They're the jewels that rejoice in the singer's heart. But now sleep, get strong again. I will sing you a lullaby.
And the emperor fell into a deep, calm sleep as she sang. The sun was shining through the window when he woke, strong and well. None of his servants had come back yet, for they thought he was dead. But the Nightingale sat and sang to him. You must always stay with me, said the emperor. You shall sing whenever you like, and I will break the artificial bird into 1,000 pieces.
Don't do that, said the Nightingale. He did his work as long as he could. Keep him as you have. I cannot build my nest in the palace and live here, but I can let you come whenever I like. I will sit in the evening on the bough outside the window, and I will sing you something that will make you feel happy and grateful. I will sing of joy and of sorrow. I will sing of evil and of good which lies hidden from you. The little songbird flies all around, at the poor fisherman's hut, to the farmer's cottage, to all those far away and from you and your court. I love your heart more than your crown, though that has about it a brightness is something holy. Now I will sing to you again, but you must promise me one thing.
Anything, said the emperor, standing up in his imperial robes, which he had himself to put on, and fastened his sword richly embossed with gold.
One thing I beg of you. Don't tell anyone that you have a little bird who tells you anything. It will be much better if you do not.
Then the Nightingale flew away. The servants came in to look at their dead emperor. The emperor said, "Good morning!" Oh, okay. I'm going to have to run ads because I had to pause them twice. So, let's get that out of the way, shall we? It's already been an hour. I've only done 2 stories. Oh, but I did not want those pre-roll things running. Ooh, the next was Icelandic, so that's going to be fun to pronounce names. We have 4 more stories. I do not want to stop until we get them done. Pretty sure I stammered a few times reading that one. And, just a reminder that it is September now. Ugh. Itches. Weird place to itch. Stuff. Prepare the pumpkins! I've been trying to grow pumpkins. When I went on vacation, my nephew didn't water them, and I lost all but one. And it's trying to bloom again, so that's just weird. I don't think I'll have homegrown pumpkins by then, but it will get rid of those. I was trying to get one of the white pumpkins and see if it would make a white pumpkin pie out of it. It's, science. I don't know if it's possible. Nope, ads are almost over. But if you make a pumpkin pie out of a white pumpkin, is it a white pumpkin pie? It would have to be baked, and I'd have to know. I could be really tacky and say, why does everyone like pumpkin spice? It's not the pumpkin, it's just the spices used in it. Because I keep thinking, I don't think I've ever tasted pumpkin in pumpkin spice drinks or anything else. It says it's pumpkin spice. It just tastes like the spices you use in pumpkin. I'm weird, I know. I mean, technically you could say it's cider spiced, because you use the same spices in apple pie to do pumpkin pie. They really don't need to know that. No, I think the difference is not big. But the truth must be known. Anyway. What is the third story? Ooh, well. I did say it was an Icelandic one, so of course it's going to have really names. Oh, well, this is nice to have foster kids involved in this one. So, next wonderful tale for this Friday night of fairy tales. I'm probably going to clip that later just for the hell of it. All the clips I ever seem to get are me singing. Usually badly. Anyway, our third story for this wonderful Friday night of fairy tales. Hermod and Hadvor. Once upon a time, there were a king and queen who only had a daughter called Hadvor, who was fair and beautiful, and being an only child, was the heir to the kingdom. The king and queen also had a foster son named Hermod, who was just about the same age as Hadvor, and, was good looking, and as well as clever at most things. Hermod and Hadvor often played together while they were children, and liked each other so much that while they were still young, they secretly pledged to someday marry each other. As kids do. As time went on, the queen fell sick, and suspecting that it was her last illness, the king sent for her to come. Then he came, and she told him that she was not long to live, therefore wished to ask him one thing, which was that if he married another wife, he should promise to take no one other than the Queen of Hetland the Good. The king gave promise, and thereafter the queen died. Time went past, and the king, growing tired of living alone, fitted out his ship and sailed out to sea. As he sailed, there came upon him a thick mist, and so thick that he had altogether lost his bearings. But after a long trouble, he found land. There he laid his ship to and went on shore. After walking for some time, he came to a forest, into which he went a little way, then stopped. Then he heard sweet music from a harp, went in the direction of the sound until he came to a clearing. There he saw 3 women, one of whom sat on a golden chair and was beautifully and grandly dressed. She held a harp in her hands and was very sorrowful. The second was also finely dressed, but younger in appearance, and also sat on a chair, but it was not so grand as the first one. The third stood behind them, and was very pretty to look at. She had a green cloak over her clothes, and it was easy to see that she was the maid of the other 2. After the king had looked at them for a little while, he went forward and saluted them. The one that sat in the golden chair asked him who he was and where he was going, and he told her all the story, how that he was a king and he had lost his queen, and now was on the way to Hetland the Good to ask the queen of that country in marriage. She answered that fortune had contrived this wonderfully, for pirates had plundered Hetland and killed the king, and she had fled from the land in terror, and had come hither after great trouble, and she was the very person that he was looking for, and the others were her daughter and her maid. The king immediately asked her hand, and she gladly received his proposal and accepted him at once. Thereafter they all set out, and made their way to the ship, and after that nothing is told of their voyage until the king reached his own country. There he made a great feast and celebrated his marriage with this woman, and after that things were quiet for a time. Hermod and Hadvor took but little notice of the queen and her daughter, but on the other hand, Hadvor and the queen's maid, whose name was Olaf, were very friendly, and Olaf came to visit Hadvor in her castle. Before long, the king went out to war, and no sooner was he away than the queen came to talk to Hermod, and said that she wanted him to marry her daughter. Hermod told her straight and plain that he would not do so, at which the queen grew terribly angry, and said that in that case neither should have Hadvor, for she would now lay the spell on him, that he should go to a desert island, and there be a lion by day and a man by night. He should also think always of Hadvor, which should cause him all the more sorrow, and from his spell he should never be freed until Hadvor burned the lion's skin. And that would not happen very soon. As soon as the queen had finished her speech, Hermod replied that he had also laid a spell on her, and that was that as soon as he was freed of her enchantments, she should become a rat and her daughter a mouse, and fight with each other in the hall until he killed them with his sword. Yeah. After this, Hermod disappeared, and no one knew what had become of him. The queen caused search to be made for him, but he could nowhere to be found. One time, when Olaf was in the castle beside Hadvor, she asked the princess if she knew where the Hermod had gone to. At this, Hadvor became very sad, and said that she did not.
I shall tell you then, said Olaf, for I know all about it. Hermod has disappeared through the wicked devices of the queen, for she is a witch, and so is her daughter, though they have put on these beautiful forms. Because Hermod did not fall for the queen's plans and marry her daughter, she has laid a spell on him to go to an island, be a lion by day and a man by night, and never be freed from this until you burn the lion's skin. Besides, said Olaf, she has looked out a match for you. She has a brother in the underworld, a three-headed giant, whom she means to turn into a beautiful prince and get you married to him. There's no new thing for the queen. She took me away from my parents' house and compelled me to serve her. She has never done me any harm, for the green cloak I wear protects me against all her mischief. Hadvor now became still sadder than before at the thought of the marriage destined for her, and entreated Olaf to think of some plan to save her. I think, said Olaf, that your wooer will come up through the floor in the castle to you, and so you must be prepared when you hear noise of his coming and the floor begins to open. And have at hand blazing pitch and pour plenty of it in the opening. That will prove too much for him. Ow. About this time the king came home from his expedition, and thought it a great blow that no one knew what had become of Hermod. But the queen consoled him as best she could, and after a time the king thought less about his disappearance. Hadvor remained in her castle, and had made preparations to receive her wooer when he came. One night, not long after, loud noise and rumbling was heard under the castle. Hadvor had guessed at once what it was, and told her maids to be ready to help her. The noise and thunder grew louder and louder until the floor began to open up. Whereupon Hadvor made them take the cauldron of pitch and pour plenty of it into the opening. With that, the noises grew fainter and fainter until they ceased altogether. The next morning, the queen rose early and went out to the palace gate, and there she found her brother, the giant, lying dead. She went to him at once. I pronounce a spell that you will become a beautiful prince, and the Hadvor shall be unable to say anything against the charges that I shall bring against her. The body of the dead giant now lay and became that of a beautiful prince, and the queen went in again. I don't think, she said to the king, that your daughter is as good as she's said to be. My brother came and asked her hand, and she has put him to death. I've just found his body lying outside the palace gate. The king went along with the queen to see the body, and thought it all very strange. So beautiful a youth, he said, would have been a worthy match for him, and he would have readily have agreed to the marriage. The queen decided to decide what Hadvor's punishment should be, which the king was very willing to allow, as to escape from punishing his own daughter. The queen's decision was that the king should make a big grave mound for her brother, and put Hadvor into it beside him. Olaf knew the plans of the queen, and went to tell the princess what had been done, whereupon Hadvor earnestly entreated her to tell her what to do. First and foremost, said Olaf, you must get a wide cloak to wear over all your clothes, and you are to put it into the mound. The giant's ghost will walk after you, with both left in there together, and he will have 2 dogs along with him. He will ask you to cut pieces off his legs and give it to the dogs, but you must not promise to do that unless he tells you where Hermod is gone, and tells you how to find him. He will then let you stand on his shoulders as they get out of the mound. But he means to cheat you all the same, and will catch you by the cloak and pull you back again. But you must take care to have the cloak loose on your shoulders, so that he will only get a hold of that. The mound was all ready now, and the giant laid it, and into it Hadvor also had to go without being allowed to make any defense. After they were both left there, everything happened just as Olaf had said. The prince became a giant again, and asked Hadvor to cut the pieces of his legs for his dogs, but refused to do so until Hermod was in the desert island, which she could not reach unless she took the skin of the soles of his feet and made shoes after that. With these shoes, she could travel both on land and sea. This Hadvor did now,
and the giant let her get up on his shoulders to get out of the mound. As she sprang out, he caught hold of her cloak, but she had taken care to let it loose on her shoulders, and so escaped. She now made her way down to the sea, where she knew there was the shortest distance over the island which Hermod was. This strait was easily crossed, for the shoes kept her up. On reaching the island, she found a sandy beach all along the sea and high cliffs above. Nor could she see any way to get up past these, and so, being both sad at heart and tired of the long journey, she lay down and fell asleep. As she slept, she dreamed that a tall woman came to her and said, "I know that you are Princess Hadvor, and are searching for Hermod. He is on this island, but it will be hard for you to get to him if you have no one to help you, for you cannot climb the cliffs by your own strength. I have therefore let down a rope by which you will be able to climb up, and as the island is so large that you might not find Hermod's dwelling place so easily, I'll lay down this clue beside you. You only need to hold the end of the thread, and the clue will run on before you and show you the way. I also lay this belt beside you to put on when you awaken. It will keep you from growing faint with hunger." The woman now disappeared, and Hadvor awoke, and saw that all her dream had been true. The rope hung down from the cliff, and the clue and the belt lay beside her. She put the belt on, and the rope enabled her to climb up the cliff. The clue led her on until she came to the mouth of a cave, which was not very big. She went into the cave and saw there a low crouch, which under she crept and lay down. When evening came, she heard the noise of footsteps outside, and became aware that the lion had come to the mouth of the cave, and shook itself there, after which she heard a man coming toward the couch. She was sure this was Hermod, because she had heard him speaking to himself about his own condition, and calling to mind Hadvor and other things in the old days. Hadvor made no sign, but waited until he had fallen asleep, and then crept out, burned the lion skin which she had left outside. Then she went back into the cave and wakened Hermod, and they had a most joyful meeting. In the morning they talked over their plans, and were most at a loss to know how they were to get off the island. Edward told Hermod her dream. She said she suspected there was someone on the island who would be able to help them. Hermod said he knew of a witch there, who was very ready to help anyone, and said the only plan was to go to her. So they went to the witch's cave and found her there with 15 young sons, and asked her to help them to get to the mainland. "There are other things easier than that," she said, "for the giant that was buried will be waiting for you and will attack you on that way, as he has turned himself into a big whale. I shall lend you a boat. However, if you meet the whale and think your lives are in danger, then you can name me by name." They thanked her greatly for her help and advice, and set out from the island. But on the way there, they saw a huge fish come towards them, with great splashing and dashing of waves. They were sure of what it was, and thought that they had good reasons that they should call on the witch. And so they did. The next minute they saw coming after them another huge whale, followed by 15 smaller ones. All of these swam past the boat and went on to meet the whale. There was a fierce battle, and then the sea became so stormy that it was not easy to keep the boat from being filled by the waves. After this fight had gone on for some time, they saw that the sea was dyed with blood. The big whale and the 15 smaller ones had disappeared, and they got to land safe and sound. Now the story goes back to the king's hall, where strange things had happened in the meantime. The queen and her daughter had disappeared, but a rat and a mouse were always fighting with each other. Ever so many people tried to drive them away, and no one could manage it. Thus some time went on, while the king was almost beside himself with sorrow and care for the loss of his queen, and because these monsters destroyed all mirth in the hall. One evening, however, while they sat dull and downhearted, in came Hermod, with a sword by his side. He saluted the king, who received him with the greatest joy, as if he had come back from the dead. Before Hermod sat down, however, he went to where the rat and the mouse were fighting, and cut them in two with his sword. All were astonished then by seeing two witches lying dead on the floor of the hall. Hermod now told the whole story to the king, who was very glad to be rid of such vile creatures. Now he asked for the hand of Hadvor, which the king readily gave, and being now an old man, gave the kingdom to him as well, and so Hermod became king. Olaf married a good-looking nobleman. That's the end of the story. I love when a story says, and that's the end of the story. And now you know the rest of the story. By your reaction, I'm guessing you know the line. That's it. Back when radio newsmen actually told news stories. Okay, that's 3 stories down. Got 3 more to go. That's you two. Next one's another fairly familiar one. Next, they're a lot shorter. Keep hiding behind my chat window. I wonder if I need to reorganize my screens. Anyway. Oh, excuse me. Our next wonderful Friday night fairy tale. The Steadfast Tin-Soldier. There were once upon a time 25 tin soldiers, all brothers, as they were made out of the same old tin spoon. Their uniform was red and blue, and they shouldered their guns and looked straight in front of them. The first words that they heard in this world, when the lid of the tin box that they lay was taken off, was, "Hurrah, tin soldiers!" This was exclaimed by a little boy, clapping his hands. They had been given to him because it was his birthday. Now he began setting them all out on the table. Each soldier was exactly like the other in shape, except for one, who had been made last when the tin had run short. But there he stood, as firmly on his one leg as the others did on two, and he is the one that became famous. There were many other playthings on the table, in which they were being set out, but the nicest of all was a pretty little castle made of cardboard, with windows through which you could see into the rooms. The front of the castle stood some little trees surrounding a tiny mirror, which looked like a lake. Wax swans were floating about and reflecting themselves in it, and that was very pretty. But the most beautiful thing was a little lady, who stood in the open doorway. She was cut out of paper, and she had a dress of the finest muslin, with a scarf of narrow blue ribbon fastened in the middle with a glittering rose made of gold paper, which was as large as her head. The little lady was stretching out both her arms, for she was a dancer, and was lifting up one leg so high in the air that the tin soldier couldn't find it anywhere. and thought that she too had only one leg. That's the wife for me, he thought. She is so grand and lives in a castle, while I suddenly have a box with 24 others. There's no place like her. I must make her acquaintance. Then he stretched himself out beside his snuff box that lay on the table. From thence he could watch the dainty little lady, who continued to stand on one leg without losing her balance. When the night came, all the other 10 soldiers went into their box, and the people of the house went to bed. Then the toys began to play at visiting and dancing and fighting. The 10 soldiers rattled in their box, for they wanted to be out too, but they could not raise the lid. The nutcrackers played leapfrog, and the slate pencil ran about the slate. There was so much noise that the canary woke up and began to talk to them, in poetry too. The only two who did not stir from their places were the Tin-Soldier and the little dancer. She remained on tiptoe, with both arms outstretched. He stood steadfastly on his one leg, never moving his eyes from her face. The clock struck 12. Crack! Off flew the lid of the snuff box, but there was no snuff inside, only a little black imp. That was a cute little. "Oh, Tin-Soldier," said the imp, "don't look at things that aren't intended for the likes of you." But the Tin-Soldier took no notice, and seemed not to hear. "Very well, wait till tomorrow," said the imp. When in the morning the children got up, the Tin-Soldier was put in the window, and whether it was a wind or a little black imp, I don't know. But all at once the window flew open, and out fell the little Tin-Soldier, head over heels, from a 3rd story. It was a terrible fall, I can tell you. He landed on his head with his leg in the air, his gun being wedged between 2 paving stones. The nursery maid and the little boy came down at once to look for him, but though they were so near him that they almost stepped on him, they did not notice him. If the Tin-Soldier had only called out, "Here I am!" they must have found him. But he did not think it fitting for him to cry out, because he had on his uniform. Soon it began to drizzle, and then the drops came faster, and there was a regular downpour, and it was over. 2 little street boys came running along. "Look!" cried one. "Here's a Tin-Soldier. You shall sail up and down in a boat." So they made a little boat out of newspaper, put the Tin-Soldier in it, and made him sail up and down the gutter. Both the boys ran along beside him, clapping their hands. What great waves there were in the gutter, and what a swift current! The paper boat tossed up and down. In the middle of the stream it went so quick that the Tin-Soldier trembled, but he remained steadfast, showed no emotion, looked straight in front of him, shouldering his gun. All at once the boat passed under a long tunnel that was dark as his box had been. "Where can I be coming now?" "Oh dear, this is Black Imp's fault. If only the little lady were sitting beside me in the boat, it might be twice as dark for all I should care." Suddenly there came along a great water rat that lived in the tunnel. "Have you a passport?" asked the rat. "Out with your passport!" The Tin-Soldier was silent, and grasped his gun more firmly. The boat sped on, and the rat went behind it. Ugh, how he showed his teeth, as he cried out for chips of wood and straw. "Hold him! Hold him! He has not paid the toll! He has not shown his passport!" But the current became swifter and stronger. The Tin-Soldier could already see daylight where the tunnel ended, but in his ears there sounded roaring enough to frighten any brave man. Only think, at the end of the tunnel, it would discharge itself into a great canal. That would be just as dangerous for him as for us to go over a waterfall. Now he was so near to it that he could not hold it any longer, and went on the boat. The poor Tin-Soldier kept keeping himself stiff as he could. No one should say him afterward that he had flinched. The boat whirled free 3 or 4 times around, became filled to the brim with water. It began to sink. The tin soldier was standing up to his neck in water. Deeper and deeper sank the boat. Softer and softer grew the paper. Now the water was over his head. He was thinking of the pretty little dancer whose face he should never see again. And there sounded in his ears over and over again. Forward, forward, soldier bold, just before the grim and cold. The paper came in two, and the soldier fell. But at that moment, he was swallowed by a great fish. Oh, how dark it was inside, even darker than in the tunnel. And it was really very close quarters. But there the steadfast little tin soldier lay at full length, shouldering his gun. Up and down the fish swam, and he made the most dreadful contortions and became suddenly quite still. Then it was a flash of lightning had passed through him, and daylight streamed in, and a voice exclaimed, "Why, there's the little tin soldier!" The fish had been caught, taken to market, sold, and brought into a kitchen, where the cook had cut open with a great knife. She took up the shoulder between her fingers and thumb, and carried him into the room, where everyone wanted to see the hero who had been found inside the fish. But the tin soldier was not at all proud. They put him on the table, but what strange things do happen in this world. The tin soldier was in the same room in which it had been before. He saw the same children, the same toys on the table. There was a grand castle with a pretty little dancer. She was still standing on one leg with the other high in the air. She, too, was steadfast. That touched the tin soldier, and he was nearly going to shed 10 tears. But that would not have been fitting for a soldier. He looked at her, but she said nothing. All at once, one of the little boys took up the tin soldier and threw him in the stove, giving no reasons. But doubtless a little black imp was in the snuff-box, was at the bottom of this as well. There the tin soldier lay and felt a heat that was truly terrible. But whether he was suffering from actual fire or from the ardor of his passion, he did not know. All his color had disappeared. Whether this had happened on his travels or whether it was a result of trouble, who can say? He looked at the little lady. She looked at him. And he felt as though he were melting, but he remained steadfast with his gun at his shoulder. Suddenly the door opened. The draft caught up the little dancer. She flew like a sift to the tin soldier in the stove, burst into flames. And that was the end of her. Then the tin soldier melted down into a little lump. The next morning, the maid was taking out the ashes. She found him in the shape of a heart. There was nothing left of the little dancer but a gilt rose, burnt as black as a cinder. Well then. It's too bad to be the last of your world. Okay. 2 more stories left. We can do this. So our next story, Blockhead-Hans. Far away in a country, in an old manor house, where lived an old squire who had 2 sons. They thought themselves so clever that if they had known only half of what they did know, it would have been quite enough. They both wanted to marry the king's daughter, for she proclaimed that she would have for her husband the man who knew best how to choose his words. Both prepared for the wooing the whole week, which was the longest time allowed them. But, after all, it was quite long enough, for they both knew preparatory knowledge, and everyone knows how useful that is. One year the whole Latin dictionary, and also 3 years' issue of the daily paper of the town by heart, so that he could repeat it all backward and forward as you pleased. The other had worked at the laws of corporation, and knew by heart what every member of the corporation ought to know, so that he thought he could quite well speak on state matters and give his opinion. He understood, besides this, how to embroider braces with roses and other flowers, and spools, and for that he was very ready with his fingers. "I shall have the king's daughter!" they both cried. Their old father gave them each a fine horse. The one who knew the dictionary and the daily paper by heart had a black horse, while the other, who was so clever at corporate law, had a milk-white one. Then they oiled the corners of their mouths so that they might speak more fluently. All the servants stood in the courtyard and saw them mount their steeds, and here by chance came the third brother, for the squire had 3 sons, but nobody counted him as his brother, for he was not quite so learned as they were, and was generally called Blockhead-Hans. "Oh-ho!" said Blockhead-Hans. "Where are you off to? You are in your Sunday best clothes." "We're off to the court to woo the princess. Don't you know what is known throughout the countryside?" And they told him all about it. "Hurrah! I'll go too," said Blockhead-Hans, and his brothers laughed at him and rode off. "Dear father," cried Blockhead-Hans, "I must have a horse too. What a desire for marriage has seized me. If she will have me, she will have me, and if she won't have me, I will have her." "Stop that nonsense," said the old man. "I will not give you a horse. You can't speak. You don't know how to choose your words. Your brothers, well, they're very different lads." "Well," said Blockhead-Hans, "if I can't have a horse, I will take the goat which is mine. He can carry me." And so he did, and he sat astride his goat and stuck his heels into his side, rattling down the high road like a hurricane. "Hippity-hop, what a ride! Here I come!" shouted Blockhead-Hans, singing so that the echoes were roused far and near. But his brothers were riding slowly in front. They were not speaking, for they were thinking all over the good things they were going to say, for everything had to be well thought out. "Hello!" bawled Blockhead-Hans. "Here I am! Just look what I found on the road!" And he showed them a dead crow which he had picked up. "Blockhead," said his brothers, "what are you going to do with that?" "With the crow? I shall give it to the princess." "Oh, do so certainly," they laughed loudly. "Slap bang, here I am again. Look what I just found. You won't find such things every day on the road." And the brothers turned around to see what in the world he could have found. "Blockhead," they said, "that is an old wooden shoe, without the top. Are you going to send that, too, to the princess?" "Of course I shall," returned Blockhead-Hans, and the brothers laughed and rode on a good way. "Slap bang, here I am!" cried Blockhead-Hans. "Better and better, really famous." "What have you found now?" asked the brothers. "Oh," said Blockhead-Hans, "it is really good. How pleased the princess will be." "Why," said the brothers, "this is pure mud, straight from the ditch." "Of course it is," said Blockhead-Hans. "It's the best kind. Look how it runs through one's fingers." And so saying, he filled his pocket with the mud. But the brothers rode on so fast that dust and sparks flew all around, and they reached the gate of the town a good hour before Blockhead-Hans. Here came the suitors, numbered according to their arrival. They were arranged in rows, 6 in a row, and they were so tightly packed that they could not move their arms. This was a very good thing, for otherwise they would have been torn each other to shreds, merely because they weren't in front of the other. All the country people were standing round the king's throne, were crowded together in thick masses, almost out the windows to see the princess receive the suitors. And as each one came into the room, all his finest phrases went out like a candle.
"It doesn't matter,"
said the princess.
"Away! Out with him!"
Unless she came to the row in which the brothers knew the dictionary by heart was. But he did not know it any longer. He had quite forgotten it in rank and file. And the floor creaked, and the ceiling was all made of glass mirrors, so that he saw himself standing on his head. And by each window were standing 3 reporters and an editor, and each of them was writing down what was said, to publish it in the paper that came out and was sold on street corners for a penny. It was fearful. They had made up such a fire, so hot, that it was growing inside. "It's hot in here, isn't it?" said the suitor.
"Of course it is. My father is roasting young chickens today,"
said the princess. There he stood, like an idiot. He was not prepared for such a speech, and he did not know what to say, although he wanted to say something witty.
"It doesn't matter," said the princess. "Take him out."
And out he had to go. Now the other brother entered.
"How hot it is," he said. "Of course, we're roasting young chickens today,"
remarked the princess. "How do you, he said, while the reporters wrote down, how do you,
"It doesn't matter. Take him out,"
said the princess. Now Blockhead-Hans came in and rode his throat right into the hall. "I say, it's roasting hot in here," he said.
"Of course, I'm roasting young chickens today," said the princess.
"Well, that's good," replied Blockhead-Hans. "Then can I roast crow with them?"
"With the greatest of pleasure," said the princess. "But have you anything you can roast them in? I have neither pot nor saucepan."
"Oh, rather," said Blockhead-Hans. "Here's a cooking implement with 10 rings." And then he drew out the old wooden shoe and laid the crow in it.
"That's quite a meal," said the princess. "But where shall we get the soup from it?"
"Oh, I've got it here in my pocket," said Blockhead-Hans. "I have so much that I can quite throw some away." And he poured some of the mud into his pocket.
"Unlike you,"
said the princess.
"You can answer and you can speak. I will marry you, but do you know that every word which we are saying and have been said has been taken down and will be in the paper tomorrow? By each window you see there standing 3 reporters and an old editor, and this old editor is the worst, for he doesn't understand anything."
But she only said this to tease Blockhead-Hans. And the reporters giggled, and each dropped a blot of ink on the floor. "Ah, those are great people," said Blockhead-Hans, "and I will give the editor the best." So saying, he turned his pockets out and threw the mud right in his face.
"That was nearly done," said the princess. "I couldn't have done it, but I will soon learn how to."
Blockhead-Hans became the king, got a wife and a crown, and sat on the throne. And this we still have damp from the newspaper for the editor and the reporters, and they are not to be believed for a moment. Yes, that would be eating crow. And a mud soup. Hey, we're down to the final story. And the final story of the Yellow Fairy Book. A story about a darning needle. There was once a darning needle who thought herself so fine that she believed that she was an embroidery needle.
Take great care to hold me tight,
said the darning needle to the fingers who were holding her.
Don't let me fall. If I once fall to the ground, I shall never be found again. I'm so fine.
It's all right, said the fingers, seizing her round the waist.
Oh, look, I'm coming with my train,
said the darning needle as she drew a long thread after her. But there was no knot at the end of the thread. The fingers were using the needle on a cook's shoe. The upper leather was unstitched and had to be sewn together.
This is common work, said the darning needle. I shall never get through. I'm breaking! I'm breaking!
In fact, she did not break.
Didn't I tell you so?
said the darning needle.
I'm too fine.
Now she's good for nothing, said the fingers. But they had to hold her tight while the cook dropped some sealing wax on the needle and stacked it in front of her dress.
Now I'm a breastpin,
said the darning needle.
I always knew I should be promoted. When one is something, one will become something.
And she laughed to herself. You can never see a darning needle laugh. Then she came up as proudly as if she were a state coach and looked all around her.
May I be allowed to ask if you're gold?
She said to her neighbor, the pin.
You have a very nice appearance and a particular head, but it is too small. You must take pains to make it grow, for it is not everyone who has the head of sealing wax.
And so saying, the darning needle raised herself so proudly that she fell out of the dress right into the sink where the cook was rinsing out.
Now I'm off on my travels,
said the darning needle.
I do hope I shan't get lost.
She did indeed get lost.
I'm too fine for this world,
she said as she lay in the gutter.
But I know who I am, and that is always a little satisfaction.
And the darning needle kept her proud bearing and did not lose her good temper. All kinds of swings swam over her, shavings, bits of straw, scraps of old newspaper.
Just look how they sail along, said the darning needle. They don't even know what is underneath them. Here I am sticking fast. There goes the shaving, thinking of nothing in the world but itself, a mere chip. There goes the straw. Well, how does it twist and twirl? Oh, to be sure. Don't think so much about yourself, or you will get knocked against a stone. There floats a bit of newspaper. What is written on is so long forgotten, and yet how proud it is. I am sitting patient and quiet. I know who I am, and it is enough for me.
One day something thick lay near her, which glittered so brightly that the darning needle thought it must be a diamond. But it was a piece of bottle glass, and because it sparkled, the darning needle spoke to it, gave herself out as a breastpin.
No doubt you're a diamond.
Yeah, something of that kind. And each believed that the other was something very costly, but they both said how proud the world must be of them.
I've come from a lady's work-box,
said the darning needle.
This lady was a cook. She had 5 fingers on each hand. Anything so proud as these fingers have I seen. Yet they were only there to take me out of the workbox and put me back again.
And were they of noble birth, then? Asked a bit of bottle glass.
Of noble birth,
said the darning needle.
No, indeed, but proud. There were 5 brothers, all called Fingers. They held themselves proudly one against each other, although we were in different sizes. The outside one, the thumb, was short and fat. He was outside the rank, and he had only one bend in his back, and he could only make one bow. But he said that if he were to rip off from another man, then he was no longer any use of a soldier. Dip into everything the second finger, dipping into sweets as well as sour things, pointed to the sun and to the moon, and the guide at the pin as it wrote Longman the third looked at the others over his shoulder. Goldband the fourth had a gold sash round his waist, and little Playman did nothing at all, and was more proud. There was so much ostentation when I came away.
And now we're sitting and shining here, said the glass. At the moment, more water came into the gutter and streamed over the edges, and washed the bit of bottle glass away.
Ah, now he has been promoted, said the Darning Needle. I remain here, and too fine, but that is my pride, which is a sign of respectability.
And she sat there very proudly, thinking lofty thoughts.
I really believe I must have been born of a sunbeam. I'm so fine. Seems to me as if the sunbeams were always looking under the water for me. Here I am, so fine that my own mother cannot find me. If I had an old eye which broke off, I believe I would weep. But I can't. It is not fine to weep.
One day, two street urchins were playing and wading in the gutter, picking up old nails, pennies, and such things. It was rather dirty work, but it was a great delight to them.
Oh!
cried out one, as he pricked himself on the Darning Needle.
Here's a fine fellow. I'm not a fellow, I'm a young lady,
said the Darning Needle, but no one heard. The sealing wax had gone, and she had become quite black, but the black only makes one look very slim, and so she thought she was even finer than before. Here comes an eggshell sailing along, said the boys, and stuck the Darning Needle into the eggshell.
More's white and I am black. What a pretty contrast it makes,
said the Darning Needle.
Now I can be seen to advantage. If only I'm not seasick, I should give myself over for lost.
But she was not seasick and did not give herself up.
It is a good thing to be steeled against seasickness. Here one is indeed an advantage over man. Now my qualms are over. The finer one is more than one can bear.
Crack. The eggshell said as a wagon wheel went over it.
Oh, how it presses,
said the Darning Needle.
I shall indeed be seasick now. I'm breaking.
But she did not break, although the wagon wheel went over her. She lay there at full length. And there she may still be lying. Yay! We have made it through the book! Darning Needle. That's what you, sew socks up with. It's for, making patches. Oh, well. That darn needle. Let's see. Yeah, it's still almost 11 o'clock, so we've finished on time. That doesn't happen very often. Not really. I feel like waiting across the jump scares. It so happens I have a friend who seems to play insulation. And his whole thing is that he does not jump scare easily, so he seems like he would be good. So let's read him. Thank you for coming by, Squall. I always appreciate you coming in. Okay. And I hope you do have a wonderful evening. And again, thank everyone for coming in. May count as two of you. Because I keep my own window open, and I tend to keep the doors open. So, I hope you all have a great night. And you have a good one, too. I guess I won't be streaming Star Wars tomorrow unless I figure out how to do things. And have a good one.